Isaiah 10, we'll start in verse 12. So it will be when the Lord has completed all his work on Mount Zion, and on Jerusalem he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the pomp of his haughtiness. For he has said, by the power of my hand and by my wisdom I did this. For I have understanding, and I removed the boundaries of the peoples and plundered their treasures. And like a mighty man I brought down their inhabitants, and my hand reached to the riches of the peoples like a nest. And as one gathers abandoned eggs, I gathered all the earth. And there was not one that flapped its wing, or opened its beak, or chirped. Does the axe boast itself over the one who chops with it? Is the saw to exalt itself over the one who wields it? That would be like a club wielding those who lift it, or like a rod lifting him who is not wood. Therefore, the Lord, the God of hosts, will send a wasting disease among his stout warriors, and under his glory a fire will be kindled like a burning flame. And the light of Israel will become a fire, and his Holy One a flame, and it will burn and devour his thorns and his briars in a single day. And he will destroy the glory of his forest and of his fruitful garden, both soul and body. And it will be as when a sick man wastes away, and the rest of the trees of his forest will be so small in number that a child could write them down. You may be seated. God uses people who don't believe in him. Victory sometimes goes to the wicked. And God is at work in this world to accomplish his purposes at times. And he will use people to accomplish those purposes, whether they believe in him or not. You know, the king of Assyria does what I want to do at times, and that is he wants to claim credit for his accomplishments, for his successes. Look at what I've done. Aren't I amazing? Aren't I a good old boy? I'm reminded in my youth, when I was younger, I was a fairly vain individual, and I was in my sophomore year of college, and I was actually kind of coming to terms with, after having read Mere Christianity, and one of the lines that stands out to me from C.S. Lewis is that if an individual thinks he's not conceited, it means he's very conceited indeed. And I thought, well, that can't be right. Anyway, but I had always, I knew that my talent was from God. There's no doubt that my abilities, right, my talent was from God. But I always sort of had taken pride in my work ethic, in working harder than other people had, putting more effort forth in the weight room or on the track or whatever, in athletic ventures, even in the classroom at times. And I ran into this individual who I had known when I was in the 5th grade, 4th grade. We'd gone to elementary school, Sunday school together, gone to the same camp. And they reminded me of a time when I was playing Nukem. I don't know if y'all know what Nukem is, but you throw the ball over the net and then you catch it. It's a really complicated game. If you don't catch it, you're out. And she reminded me how I played that game as a 5th grader, right? With just such intensity, diving to catch the ball, and I played it as hard as I absolutely could. And I got to thinking, and I couldn't remember a time that I hadn't done things that way, that I hadn't done things with that level of intensity, especially athletically. And I realized something. Maybe God had more to do with my work ethic than I did. I think of often what God has to say to the king of Assyria when I want to take credit for the things that I have done. And I think Isaiah's imagery is better than any imagery I could possibly use. At the end of a long day's work, if I were to sit down exhausted, having tilled up my garden with a shovel, would my shovel look at me and say, I did all the work, you didn't do anything? Does the axe that we wield tell us that we are nothing when we wield it? And so is God's response to the king of Assyria. I recently watched The Imitation Game. I don't know if you've had a chance to see this movie. I couldn't help but think of Isaiah 10 as I watched this movie. And so it's about World War II, and they crack the German code. And when they crack the code, they make the comment that we have more power than God right now. And they'll say things in that movie like, we decided who lived and who died. Because they knew where the Germans were going to be and what time they were going to be there. And close to the end of the movie, they make the comment that God didn't win the war, we did. And I was so reminded of the king of Assyria, and in that comment, right, in that perspective, yelling against him who lifts them up and boasting against the lifter of the rod. One other passage comes to mind, and then I'll move off at this point about pride. In Deuteronomy 8, the people are reminded, there's going to come a time in your life when things aren't so bad, and when things go well, when you prosper. And you can look at yourself and say, look at how much I've done. Look at what I've accomplished. By the strength of my brow and the sweat of my brow, I've done this. And remember that it is God who has given you the ability to produce wealth. I think we find here both a warning not to be like the king of Assyria, and the encouragement that when we run into people who are like the king of Assyria, that it's okay that the wicked sometimes prosper. God is using them for His own purposes, and we can't see that sometimes, what He's trying to accomplish in the world. And when He's done with them, He tells Israel, and I think we should be reminded that when He's done with them, verse 25 of Isaiah here, after he goes on, for in a very little while my anger against you will be spent, and my anger will be directed toward their destruction, that is the king of Assyria. The Lord of hosts will arouse a scourge against him like the slaughter of Midian at the rock of Oreb, and his staff will be over the sea, and he will lift it up the way he did in Egypt. When God is done with them, I suppose we would say that they would receive their just reward for failing to acknowledge that God is God, and that God uses us to accomplish His purposes. And we have a choice. We can acknowledge that God is supreme and that He is doing a work in us that we could not do without His help, or we can, like the axe, boast against Him who lifts us up. And when God is done with us, He will show us who it was that really was at work. Thank you.